I have worked search and rescue in a national forest in the western United States for 8 years. I am not going to tell you which forest. I am not going to tell you which state. The people I work with do not know I am sharing this, and the agency I work for would not approve if they did. What I am going to tell you is the truth. Every detail I describe in this video actually happened. The cases are real. The dates are approximate but accurate within a few weeks. The outcomes are exactly as I experienced them. Most of what I do is routine. I want to be clear about that up front, because the internet has a way of making SAR work sound like every call is a descent into the unknown, and that is not reality. 90% of what we do is finding lost day hikers who went off trail without a map, twisted ankles, dehydration, the occasional climber who got stuck on a ledge and needs a rope. We find them, we stabilize them, we bring them out. It is physically demanding work, and I am proud of it. But most of the time, it is not mysterious. It is not frightening. It is just work. But some calls are different. Some cases come in looking routine, and then somewhere during the operation something happens that does not fit. A detail that does not make sense. A piece of evidence that contradicts the timeline. A sound or a feeling or a set of circumstances that nobody on the team can explain. These cases get resolved on paper. The missing person is found or they are not found. And the file gets closed and the report gets submitted and everyone goes home. But the details that did not make sense stay in your head. They do not resolve. They just sit there. In 8 years, I have worked hundreds of operations. 3 of them haunt me. These are those 3. Case 1, the perfect circle. The call came in on a Sunday morning in late September, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. A solo hiker had not returned to his vehicle at a trailhead parking area. His car had been sitting there since Friday afternoon. A day-use pass on the dashboard was dated 2 days prior. Nobody had seen him on the trail. Nobody had heard from him. His emergency contact, a sister in another state, had called the ranger station when he missed a scheduled phone call Saturday night. Standard missing hiker protocol. We pulled his permit, which told us he had planned a day hike on a 12-mile loop trail. In and out, in one day. No overnight gear. He was 41 years old, in good physical condition, experienced hiker, no known medical issues. His sister described him as careful, methodical, and not the kind of person who deviated from a plan. We deployed a 6-person ground team on Sunday morning and started working the trail. The first several miles showed nothing unusual. The trail was well maintained, clearly marked, moderate difficulty, good conditions. No technical terrain, no major water crossings. It was not the kind of trail where an experienced hiker gets into trouble unless something goes wrong that has nothing to do with the trail. We found his pack at approximately mile 7, just off the trail in a small clearing. It was leaning upright against a tree, as if he had set it down to take a break. Inside was a water bladder about half full, 2 energy bars unopened, a rain jacket, a first aid kit, and a GPS unit. Everything was organized and intact. There was no sign of injury, no blood, no torn fabric, no indication of an animal encounter. The pack looked like a man had taken it off his shoulders, set it against a tree, and walked away. Walked away without his water, without his food, without his GPS, without his rain jacket. In September, in the mountains, when the weather can turn in 20 minutes. An experienced, methodical hiker who his own sister described as careful left everything behind and kept walking. We expanded the search radius from the pack location. Ground teams. A dog unit. Air support ran a grid pattern overhead. We searched for 3 days. We did not find him. No body. No clothing. No additional gear. No tracks that we could follow beyond a short distance from where the pack was found. He was simply gone. But the GPS unit told us something. And this is the part that I have never been able to reconcile. The unit was an older model that recorded a tracklog, a breadcrumb trail of coordinates, logged at regular intervals. We downloaded the data and mapped it. For the first 6.5 miles, the track followed the trail exactly, a clean, logical line matching the route he had planned. Normal pace, normal stops, everything consistent with a day hiker moving at a comfortable speed through familiar terrain. At approximately mile 6.7, the track left the trail, not dramatically, not as if he had fallen or run. The breadcrumbs simply drifted to the left, off the maintained path, into the forest. And then, the track began to curve. Over the next 6 hours and 14 minutes, according to the timestamps on the GPS log, the hiker walked in a circle, a nearly perfect circle, approximately 2 miles in circumference, through unmarked forest, off-trail, with no path and no destination, around and around, the same circle, for 6 hours. The pace was consistent, about 2 miles per hour, which is a normal walking speed, through moderate terrain. He was not running, he was not stumbling. He was walking at a steady, sustained pace in a circle 2 miles wide for over 6 hours. He completed the circle approximately 4.5 times before the GPS log stopped. The final coordinate was near the location where we found the pack. The timestamps indicated that the GPS stopped recording at approximately 11:40 at night. He had started the circle in the late afternoon and walked through dusk, through nightfall and into full darkness, around and around the same loop through the trees, for 6 hours. Then the device stopped recording. Not because the battery died. The unit had battery life remaining when we recovered it. The track simply ended, as if the device had been turned off, or as if it had been removed from the person carrying it and set down. We searched that circle, every foot of it. We walked the route the GPS had logged, and we examined every square meter of forest inside and outside the loop. We found nothing. No body. No clothing. No footprints that we could definitively attribute to him, because 3 days of weather had degraded the ground. Just trees and brush and silence. I have talked to the team about this case more than any other. We have no explanation. People do not walk in perfect circles for 6 hours. Disoriented hikers wander erratically. They zigzag. They backtrack. They stop and sit down. They do not maintain a consistent pace on a consistent circular path through dense forest in the dark for 6 hours and 14 minutes. That is not how lost people behave. That is not how any person behaves. The case was classified as a missing person. The file is still open. He has never been found. Case 211 miles. This one is harder to talk about because we recovered a body. And out of respect for the family, I am going to change several details. The age, the gender, the season, and the specific terrain are altered. The distances, the conditions of the body, and the evidence are exactly as I found them. A hiker was reported missing after failing to return from an overnight trip. Last known position was established from their permit, and a text message sent from a point on the trail where cell service briefly existed. The text was sent at 2:17 in the afternoon on day 1 of a planned 2-day trip. It was a normal message. Casual. Weather is great. Trail is beautiful. See you tomorrow. Nothing in the message suggested distress. When the hiker did not return on schedule, we deployed. We started at the last known position, which was at a specific mile marker on the trail, and worked outward. Standard protocol. Grid search. Dog teams. Air support. We found the body on day 2 of the search. It was in a ravine, at the bottom of a steep but not technically impassable drainage, in an area of dense timber. The body showed injuries consistent with a fall into the ravine. The cause of death, as later determined by the medical examiner, was blunt force trauma from the fall combined with exposure. This was a plausible, if sad, conclusion. Hikers fall. Terrain is unforgiving. It happens. But the location did not make sense. The body was found 11 miles from the last known position. 11 miles, measured by GPS, through terrain that had no trail, no maintained route, and no logical reason for a hiker to traverse. The area between the last known position and the recovery site was some of the most difficult off-trail terrain in the district. Steep drainages, deadfalls so thick you would need to climb over and under fallen trees for hours, cliff bands that would require technical equipment to descend safely. A fit, experienced hiker moving deliberately through that terrain might cover 1 mile per hour at best. 11 miles would represent a minimum of 11 hours of continuous, extremely strenuous bushwhacking. The hiker sent the text at 2:17 in the afternoon. Sunset that time of year was approximately 6:30. That gives a window of about 4 hours of daylight, followed by complete darkness in terrain that would be genuinely dangerous to traverse even with a headlamp. To reach the point where the body was found, the hiker would have had to leave the trail almost immediately after sending the text, travel in a straight line through the most difficult terrain available, maintain a pace that even our strongest team members would struggle to achieve, continue through the night without stopping, and arrive at the ravine sometime in the early hours of the morning. None of that is consistent with the behavior of a hiker who had just sent a casual, relaxed text message about the weather. But the detail that genuinely unsettled the team, the detail that I have thought about for years, was the boots. The hiker was wearing trail boots. Standard hiking footwear, broken in, well-maintained. When we recovered the body, I examined the boots as part of standard evidence documentation. The soles showed almost no wear consistent with the distance supposedly traveled. 11 miles through dense, rocky, root-covered off-trail terrain would destroy the soles of any hiking boot. You would see deep scuffing, gouges, embedded debris, worn-down tread, abrasion on the uppers from deadfall and brush. These boots looked like they had walked maybe a mile on a maintained trail. The leather was barely scuffed. The tread was largely intact. The laces were still tied in the same knot pattern the hiker presumably used when putting them on that morning. I raised this in the debrief. The team lead acknowledged the discrepancy. He said it would be noted in the report. It was noted. It was not explained. The case was closed as an accidental fall. The family was told their loved one had gone off trail for unknown reasons and fallen into the ravine. That is the official record. The boots are not in the official record. I have checked. Case 3, the crying in the canyon. This is the case I have never told anyone outside of the team. Not my wife. Not my family. Not the friends I have in the service who work other districts. I am telling it here because I do not think I can carry it quietly anymore, and because I think other SAR people have experienced something similar and are carrying the same silence. We were on night operations during an active search for a missing person. Male, 50 years old, experienced outdoorsman. Last seen at a trailhead 48 hours prior. He had gone on a solo day hike and had not returned. His vehicle was at the trailhead. His phone was going straight to voicemail. No pings, no GPS data. By the time I was deployed, we had been searching for a full day with no results. Night operations in SAR are different from daytime work. You are moving through terrain by headlamp. Your field of vision is reduced to whatever your light touches. The sounds of the forest are amplified because you cannot see, so your brain compensates by paying more attention to what it hears. Every crack, every rustle, every animal call registers differently at 2 in the morning than it does at 2 in the afternoon. You learn to manage that. You learn to filter. After 8 years, I can distinguish a deer moving through brush from a person moving through brush by sound alone, in the dark, at 50 yards. It is not a skill you practice. It is a skill that develops from necessity. We were working a canyon, a deep, narrow drainage that cut through the search area, steep walls on both sides, heavy timber at the bottom, a seasonal creek that was mostly dry this time of year. The canyon ran roughly north-south for about 3 miles. We were working the southern end, moving north, 2-person teams spaced about 100 yards apart. At approximately 2:15 in the morning, I heard a child crying. I stopped walking. My partner, who was about 10 feet behind me, stopped at the same moment. He had heard it too. I did not have to ask. The sound was coming from deeper in the canyon, north of our position. Maybe 200, maybe 300 yards ahead, though sound behaves strangely in narrow canyons, and distance is difficult to judge. It was the unmistakable sound of a young child, not an infant, not a teenager, a child, maybe 4 or 5 years old, crying, not screaming, not calling for help. Just the sustained, exhausted crying of a small child who has been frightened or alone for a long time. The kind of crying that has no energy left in it. The kind that is more reflex than communication. It echoed off the canyon walls, and the echo made it sound like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. But there was a directional source. It was ahead of us, and below us, deeper in the canyon, in the heaviest timber. My partner and I looked at each other. I keyed my radio. I reported to command that we were hearing what sounded like a child crying in the canyon, approximately 200 to 300 yards north of our position. I requested permission to deviate from our assigned grid and investigate the sound. There was a pause on the radio, longer than normal. Then command came back and said, "Negative. Continue on your assigned grid. Do not investigate the sound." I looked at my partner. He was looking at me. We had both heard the order. And we had both heard the child. I keyed the radio again. I said I wanted to confirm. We were hearing what sounded like a child in distress in the canyon. Requesting permission to investigate. Same response. Negative. Continue on your assigned grid. Do not deviate. The transmission ended. No explanation. No follow-up. No reassignment of another team to investigate. We stood there in the dark and listened to a child crying somewhere ahead of us in the canyon. We listened for about 4 minutes. The sound was continuous. Same cadence, same pitch, same exhausted, rhythmic quality. It did not move. It did not get louder or softer. It just continued, steady and unvarying, coming from a fixed point somewhere in the trees below us. Then it stopped. Not faded, stopped, mid-cry, as if a recording had been switched off. One moment the sound was there, filling the canyon. The next moment there was nothing but wind and the faint trickle of the creek. We continued on our grid. We did not speak for the next hour. When we returned to the staging area at the end of our shift, I went to the command post and asked the operations lead why we were told not to investigate the sound of a child crying in the canyon during an active search. He was filling out paperwork. He did not look up. He said, "There were no children reported missing in the area. The missing person was a 50-year-old male. There are no residences, no campsites, and no structures within 5 miles of that canyon. There was no child in that canyon." I said I understood all of that. I said I was asking why we were told not to investigate a sound that we heard with our own ears. He looked up. He looked at me for a long time. And then he said in a tone that was not hostile and was not dismissive but was very, very tired, because there was no child in that canyon. He went back to his paperwork. The conversation was over. I found out later from another team member who had more years on the job than I did that I was not the first person to hear crying in that canyon. He said it had been reported before, on at least 2 other operations that he knew of, both times during night searches, both times from the same general area of the drainage. He said command's response had been the same each time. Do not investigate. Continue on grid. He told me there was no official documentation of the sound in any of the case files. It was never logged. It was never investigated. It was never explained. He said the people who had been in the service long enough knew about it, and they did not talk about it, and they did not go into that section of the canyon at night if they could avoid it. I asked him what he thought it was. He said he did not think about it. And he suggested I do the same. The missing person from that operation was never found. 3 cases. Hundreds of operations across 8 years, and these are the 3 that stay. The hiker who walked in a perfect circle for 6 hours and vanished. The body found 11 miles from the last known position with boots that had barely been worn. The child crying in a canyon where no child existed. I do not have explanations for any of them. I am not going to offer theories or speculation because I do not think theories help. What I can tell you is that the wilderness is not what most people think it is. Most people experience the outdoors on maintained trails in daylight within a few miles of a road. That version of the wilderness is managed, understood, and relatively safe. The version I work in, the deep backcountry at night, miles from anything, in the places where we go when someone disappears, that version is different. Things happen out there that do not make sense. Details emerge that do not fit. And the people who spend enough time in those places, the people who see enough operations and enough outcomes, they learn that some things get logged and never explained. You do not ask about them. You do not investigate them. You file your report and you go home and you do not talk about it. Until you do. If you work in search and rescue, wildland fire, law enforcement, or any other profession that takes you into the deep backcountry, and you have experienced something on an operation that was never explained, I want to hear from you. Your identity will be fully protected. Your agency will not be named. Your story will be treated with the respect it deserves. Submit your account to the email in the description. Subject line, SAR Story. If you are new here, start with something followed us on the Winding Stair Trail, linked below. We post true wilderness horror every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe. And if you are working a night operation this week somewhere in the backcountry and you hear something in the dark that command tells you not to investigate, do yourself a favor. Listen to command.